Welcome back to Function Loops tutorials. Today we'll be looking at how to mix the lead sounds. First I will play the main lead, then add in the chords followed by the bass. What we'll do first is we'll take a look at the main vocal lead. It sounds a bit like this. It's basically phalanx. I dragged and dropped a vocal sample into this, and then it just plays it. And then I tuned it to C, so every time I press C, it's in tune. Added a bit of portamento on there, a bit of legato, which is done over here. And then what I did was added a bit crush into it. So as you can hear, it adds a bit of saturation and makes it much brighter. I've got the AA reverb on there, adding a lot of depth. As you can hear, it's adding a lot of depth to that. Then I added the UAD dynamite, so it's what it sounds like with it. And then without. So as you can hear, it adds a bit of saturation to it and also brings out all the reverb, so I can know how much reverb I'm messing around with before I sort of mix it. So I can either dial the reverb back or add more. So I always put that in first. Then I put the Bryson channel strip on there because the UAD makes it run out a bit hot. So I just dial it back a bit. So this is basically volume control, just dialing it back so it's not running too hot. Then I got the kickstart on there, which is a sidechain compressor basically. So it adds a little bit of groove and keeps it out of the way of the kick, so there's no conflicting frequencies. So I'll play it with and without. Then I added the Waves Aural Exciter on there, which basically just adds a little bit high end. It's only subtle, and it basically actually cuts a bit of the low end out, just subtly. So I'll play that with and without. So as you can hear, there's some quite low frequencies in there, just like whistling away. So if I try that an octave lower. As you can hear, it sort of cleans it up quite a lot. It's only subtle. So I'll put the notes back. Next, I've got the S1 Imager from Waves, basically just adding a lot of width to it. So I'll play it with and then without. As you can hear, it's quite mono without it. It's just sending it wide, which is quite nice. Next, we've got the Pro Q2 on there, just cutting out the sub, which is not needed. I've got another Pro Q2 on there, just doing some surgical EQing. So I'll play that. As you can hear, there's a whistly sound in there, didn't like. It's whistling, so if you can hear that. So I just cut that out. Way you can do that is basically you can either sort of try and listen out for it, and if you hear a problem frequency, try whistling it, or just put a narrow Q on there, put a gain on there, and then slowly go through the frequencies until you find a problem, like a whistle. So as you can hear, there's one, and then just basically just cut that out. Also, what you can do with this is there's an auto gain button on here. That means anything you cut out, it will basically compensate the volume. So it'll just add more gain to it, so you can actually hear if you're cutting too much out or adding too much in. So if I show you that. So as you can hear, I've cut all this out here, and it's gone really bright. But without the auto on there, the auto gain, it sounds fine. So it's quite a nice function, because you actually know that I won't cut that out. I'll keep that in there because it sounds worse with it cut out. Same with the highs. So say that might sound better to some people, but when you actually do the auto compensation for it, it's too bright. And what also I'll always do on there is I will always mix. I'll always mix it. So what I'll do is I'll do the surgical stuff first, and then I'll add it into and then I'll play the mix, and then add or take anything away, because what will sound better soloed won't sound right in the mix. So I'll always do the main mixing. The main EQing in the mix. So if I play the bass, a couple of other sounds. So on its own, you might think, oh, it sounds, we need more high end on that, it's not bright enough. So some people might say, oh, that sounds better like that. but when it's in the mix, it's too bright. It's come in the mix too much. Same with the Audio Exciter. So on its own, you might think, oh, it sounds really, really nice, and then when you put it in the mix, it's too bright. So always mix, always EQ in the mix. So do your surgical stuff first, and then anything like major, like this one here and that one there, do it in the mix. Next, I've got the UAD API channel strip. This is basically running the signal through it. Clips every now and again, which is quite nice. It's just mimicking running through the hardware. It's a little bit brighter, adds a little bit of brightness to it. It's quite nice. And then what I've got on there next is the retro EQ, just cutting off the lows and the highs. Sort of this area here, you won't hear it in a way, so you might as well cut it out. Quite subtle. And then the Oxford Inflator, which is basically adding a bit of saturation, and this is how much it's being affected. And then this is the curve, so anything above 0 is affecting the high end, anything below 0 is doing the low end. Then I've got the L3 LL Ultra Maximizer, which I really like, from Waves. It has different settings. As you can hear, it's limiting it quite a bit, so I'll do it with and without. Yeah, so it's basically adding quite a lot of volume to it, and it's also taming all the peaks. With the profile, you can change the profile, so if you have extreme analog, it cuts quite a lot of the highs out, which I really quite like. Next, we have a synth that's basically accompanying the main lead. So it's basically the same notes as above, and I'll play it without anything on it. And that is basically Spire, and again from the preset pack Tropicana, and it's under chord, and basically I just changed it a little bit to how I liked it. Again, we got the UAD Valley on there, adding a bit of saturation, and bringing out the reverb again. And the Bryson channel to tame it again. With the Bryson as well, you want it to basically hit underneath 0 dB. You don't want it going over because it's sort of clipping. And then the kickstart. And then the S1 imager, setting it wide. Careful with the S1 imager because it will add a lot more sort of length to the sound. So basically it adds more release to it. So be careful with that, and it adds a little bit high end sometimes. And then you got the Audio Exciter on there. Very subtle. Again, it's cutting the low end out a little bit and adding a tiny little bit of sparkle to it. And then I've got the FabFilter Pro Q2, cutting the low out, cutting the highs out, cutting a problematic frequency out, cutting some of the mid-range out, which I didn't need. Retro EQ, cutting the highs and lows out again. Sort of rounding it off. The Inflator again, adding a bit more high to it. Bit of saturation, quite nice with it. And then just a limiter again. It's just it's quite subtle, this limiter, so I like it. So I'm just basically taming it, just putting 3 dB on it. Not much reduction at all. So I'll move on to the chords now. Here's the notes. And I'm using Spire for that, and using the Tropicana preset pack again. Just tweaked it to how I liked it. And then I got the UAD Dynamite again, just play it without anything on. So as you can hear, I've done quite a lot of EQ into that. So I've added the Dynamite on there, just bring the reverb out, taking the dynamic range away, and a bit of clipping on there. And I got the Bryson on there just to tame it. So it's under 0 dB, and then the kickstart on there, adding a bit of groove to it. and keeping out of the way of the kick drum. And then I've got the Pro Q2 on there, just adding a bit of low end to it. Just rounding off the sound as well. So getting rid of the highs, getting rid of some problem frequencies. And I've got the retro EQ, just cutting the highs and the lows off again. It's the only thing I missed. Inflator, basically just cutting, not doing much really actually. And then the limiter. So I'll play it, and I'll bypass the so as you can hear, it sits in the mix much better. Cutting out all the problem frequencies. So like I said before, when I mix, I will mix in the sort of EQ it in the mix. As you heard there, it sort of sounds horrible with it off. So that's on. It's a lot more clean sounding. So that's the chords. Right, I'll move on to the second part of the chords, which is that. It's the same notes as above, just an octave higher, and they're playing at the same time. Again, it's the preset pack Tropicana, Inspire, Bora Bora is the preset name, and I'll just play without anything on it. That's dry, as you can hear, there's quite a lot of going on in that, so I add them in one by one. So again with the UAD Valley, Bryson channel strip just to tame it again, get the kickstart again, and then I've got a bit of subtly cueing on this, so I'll play it. So as you can hear, that's quite prominent sound. What also I've done is there is actually other problem frequencies in this, but I didn't cut them out because I actually found it added a bit more sort of other elements to it. So there's quite a whistle there. When I cut it out, it doesn't seem right in the mix. Some problem frequencies actually leave in there just to give it a different texture. So this is basically cutting out the highs, and then just subtly there. And then on there next, I've got the effects rack from Sound Toys, and all this is doing is basically cutting out the a bit of low end on there, just cutting out subtly, cutting out the low end. So just bypass that. And then just basically move the mix back. Again, it's quite subtle. Everything I do is pretty subtle. Not much going on with the inflator. Again, not much going on with the limiter, just to tame all the peaks. And then the retro EQ, just cutting off the highs and lows again. Then I've got a mega saw basically doing the same notes as the main lead and the chords. Sounds a bit like this. So again, I've got the Valley on there, Brighton channel strip, so pretty much put on everything, just tames everything. And then I've got the sidechain compression, I've got the S1 on there again, sending it wide. Also what I like to do is get the sounds out the way of sort of like the bass, send it a bit more wide, gives you a bit more room to play with. I've got the Pro Q2 on there, just adding a bit of high, cutting out some of the crap in there. As you can hear, that's really nice. And the cut low end, which you don't need. The reason I don't need the low end is because the bass is basically doing it. So what you should do is you should cut out stuff that another sort of sound's doing. So if the bass is doing that area, you should cut it out. If you have it in there, you can have conflicting sounds or conflicting frequencies. And then I got the exciter on there again, very subtle. Again, cutting out a tiny bit of the low end and a tiny little bit of sparkle. Just retro EQ, just cutting the highs and lows off again. Rounding it. Inflator and the limiter. Right, I'll move on to the held sound. Sounds a bit like this. Got a bit of automation on there for the rise. The notes are basically straight 16th, but without the sidechain on there, it takes the groove away. It's quite groovy with the sidechain on. I'm using Spire for that. I'm using a pluck called Pluck Bellarium, and basically just automating the pitch wheel for the rise. And then I'll just take everything off and play it dry. So again, I've got the Valley on there, got the Bryson channel strip, got a kickstart, sidechain. Got the effect rack on there again, cutting the low end out again. Brighten up it just a fraction. And then what I've got here, I've got the FabFilter 2, and I've cut out some of the problem frequencies. So as you can hear, quite hollow sounding, which is that note there. And it's actually C sharp, which is the same as the notes it's playing. So that fundamental note is a bit sharp for me. So I've just backed it off a little bit. That note there didn't sound very nice, so I just EQ'd them out. I've got the S1 again on there, making it wide. As you can hear, it's made it really wide. And I've got the Pro Q on there as well, just cutting the highs and lows off. Rounding it off. The inflator, just adding a bit more high, bit of saturation. And then another limiter, just taming the peaks. Bit of reduction on there, as you can hear.